Good evening. Delroy and I are delighted to be presenting the first BAFTA of the night for a vital part of movie making.
At the 2026 BAFTA Film Awards, the room was full of celebrities, BBC cameras rolling, a major awards show watched around the world, and then in the middle of the presentation, a racial slur echoed through the crowd, leaving everyone frozen in real time. Michael B. Jordan and Delroy Lindo stood there, trying to keep the moment together while the entire room went quiet. What viewers didn't initially understand was that the outburst came from John Davidson, a Tourette's activist whose involuntary tics had caused the incident. No interruption, no immediate correction, just silence hanging in the air while millions watched. And here's where this story gets even more uncomfortable. Watch till the end, because we're going to break down the one detail about the 2-hour broadcast delay that's making people question whether this moment could have been prevented, and why some believe the real controversy started after the BBC cameras stopped rolling. Because this wasn't just about one person's medical condition causing something offensive. It was about what happened next, the reactions, the explanations, the editing decisions, and the growing debate over who was responsible for how the moment played out on screen. Once you look at the timeline, the responses, and what was reportedly removed from the broadcast versus what was left in, the question stops being who said it. It becomes why the moment was allowed to stay.
That moment at the BAFTA Awards leaving viewers in shock.
We're here to celebrate the artists who expand what's possible on screen.
Michael B. Jordan and his Sinners co-star Delroy Lindo hit with the N-word from the crowd while presenting the award for Best Visual Effects.
At first, people thought they misheard it. Award shows are loud, crowds react, voices overlap, but within seconds, social media clips started spreading, and the moment became impossible to ignore. Viewers replayed it again and again, trying to confirm what had actually been said during the Best Visual Effects presentation. And the reaction was immediate. Some people were shocked that the slur made it through a BBC broadcast at all. Others focused on the silence that followed, the way the room seemed to freeze, unsure whether to react or move on. Michael B. Jordan and Delroy Lindo, who were presenting for their upcoming film Sinners, kept their composure, continuing forward like professionals who knew the cameras were still rolling. But that calm only made the moment feel heavier, because everyone watching could sense something had gone wrong. And that's when the bigger questions started. If the show had a 2-hour broadcast delay, why wasn't the audio cut? Who made the decision to let it continue? And did BBC producers realize what had happened in real time? The moment itself lasted only seconds, but the fallout was just beginning.
Okay, now let's turn to last night's BAFTA Awards, which are the British equivalent of the Oscars, and in a shocking moment, a racial slur was yelled out as Sinners stars Michael B. Jordan and Delroy Lindo presented an award.
In minutes, clips of the moment were everywhere. Different angles, different edits. Some versions muted the audio, others slowed it down, replaying the exact second over and over as viewers tried to figure out what happened. And as the footage spread, the focus shifted from John Davidson and his Tourette syndrome to the people behind the BBC broadcast. Because live television isn't truly live, there's usually a delay, enough time to cut audio, switch cameras, or protect viewers from moments exactly like this. That detail became the center of the debate almost immediately. If safeguards existed, why didn't they work? Some viewers blamed the producers. Others argued the situation happened too fast to control. But the longer people analyzed the clip, the harder it became to accept that no one could have stepped in. And while the internet argued about responsibility, the BAFTAs itself kept moving forward. No immediate statement, no interruption, just a moment that felt like it was being quietly pushed aside, which only made people pay even closer attention to what happened next.
John Davidson, the man who yelled the racial slur, has Tourette's syndrome and actually interrupted the program a few times. His life with the motor disorder, which can cause explicit, involuntary verbal outbursts, was the inspo behind the nominated film I Swear.
What happened next made the situation even more complicated. Instead of addressing the moment directly, the show continued as if nothing had happened. Host Alan Cumming eventually offered a brief on-air acknowledgement, but it came much later. Presenters moved on, segments rolled forward, the audience tried to reset the energy in the room, but viewers at home weren't moving on. They were watching closely, waiting for someone, anyone, to acknowledge what had just aired on BBC. And when that acknowledgement didn't come immediately, frustration started growing online. Because silence can feel like a decision, some people believed BBC producers were trying to avoid making the moment bigger. Others argued that ignoring it made things worse, turning a few seconds of shock into a larger controversy about accountability. And that's when attention shifted toward the network itself. Who made the call not to address it immediately? Was there discussion happening behind the scenes while the show continued? Or did everyone simply hope the moment would disappear on its own? The longer the broadcast went without clarification, the more uncomfortable the situation became. Because now the story wasn't just about what was said, it was about how the people in control chose to respond. And that response, or lack of one, is what pushed the story into a different level of controversy. Because viewers weren't just reacting to the slur anymore. They were reacting to the feeling that everyone on stage was being forced to pretend nothing had happened. The BAFTA's polished image suddenly felt fragile, like the illusion of control had cracked for a moment and nobody knew how to fix it. Online, the conversation split fast. Some people argued that stopping the show would have made the situation worse, especially given the context of Tourette syndrome. Others said silence looked like avoidance, like the BBC production was more concerned with keeping the broadcast smooth than addressing what millions had just heard. And then another detail started circulating. Reports suggesting parts of the broadcast were edited or handled differently depending on whether viewers watched on BBC One or later on iPlayer. That raised even more questions about what decisions were being made in real time and who was making them. Because if changes were possible after the moment happened, why didn't they happen sooner? And suddenly the focus wasn't on one person with a medical condition causing something offensive. It was on the entire system behind the cameras, and whether it failed when it mattered most.
Oh, you always take it a day at a time.
You may have heard some strong and offensive language tonight.
Host Alan Cumming addressing the incident head-on.
If you've seen the film I Swear, you will know that film is about the experience of a person with Tourette syndrome.
Once people started questioning the system behind the cameras, the conversation got bigger than the BAFTAs itself. Because live television runs on layers of control, BBC producers monitoring audio, directors choosing shots, teams ready to react when something unexpected happens. Viewers know that. So when something slips through, the immediate assumption is that someone, somewhere, missed a decision. And that's what kept fueling the debate. Was the 2-hour delay too short? Did producers hesitate, unsure of what they heard? Or did the moment move so fast that by the time anyone reacted, it was already out to millions? Those questions mattered because they shifted responsibility away from John Davidson's involuntary outburst and toward the structure of the broadcast. Meanwhile, people started analyzing the reactions in the room. The body language, the pause, the way some faces looked stunned while others tried to keep smiling for the cameras. It felt like two realities happening at once. One on stage at the Royal Festival Hall, trying to keep the show alive, and one online, replaying the moment frame by frame. And the more viewers studied it, the more one idea started gaining traction. Maybe the real controversy wasn't the word itself. Maybe it was how unprepared everyone seemed when it happened. That idea changed the tone of the conversation almost overnight. Because once people started believing the show wasn't prepared, the focus turned to responsibility. Not just who said the word, but who was supposed to protect the audience from moments like this in the first place. Live BBC broadcasts aren't accidents. They're planned down to the second. Scripts, rehearsals, contingency plans, everything designed to prevent chaos from reaching the screen. So when chaos slips through anyway, viewers start questioning how solid that system really is. And the more experts weighed in online, the more complicated it sounded. Some said 2-hour delays aren't always long enough to catch sudden outbursts. Others argued that experienced production teams are trained for exactly these situations involving medical conditions like Tourette syndrome. That disagreement only made the story grow, because now people weren't just debating the moment, they were debating competence. And while all of that unfolded online, the BAFTAs continued trying to protect its image, keeping the focus on winners, speeches, and celebration. But the audience had already shifted attention elsewhere. The uncomfortable moment had become the main event, and once that happens, every decision after it gets judged through a different lens.
Visual effects can create spectacle, but the best work serves character and story.
Michael and Delroy keeping their cool on stage, a source telling ET the actors found the incident jarring and disappointing, but Michael was still in good spirits after the fact.
And that different lens changed how people watched the rest of the night. Every camera cut felt more noticeable. Every reaction shot got analyzed. Viewers started wondering whether BBC producers were deliberately avoiding certain angles or trying to steer attention away from the controversy. Even normal moments started feeling calculated. That's what happens when trust gets shaken during a live broadcast. The audience stops watching passively and starts looking for signs of control behind the scenes. Meanwhile, clips of the incident kept spreading faster than the show itself. People who hadn't even watched the BAFTAs were now seeing the moment first through social media, which meant the narrative was being shaped outside the broadcast. And once social media takes control of a story, it moves faster than any official response. Opinions hardened quickly. Some viewers demanded accountability. Others said mistakes happen and the backlash was overblown, especially considering the Tourette syndrome context. But no matter which side people landed on, everyone agreed on one thing. The moment had overshadowed the event, and that created a new problem for BBC, because now they weren't just managing a live show, they were managing a public perception crisis that was growing by the minute. As the night went on, the absence of a clear explanation became louder than any statement could have been. Viewers kept waiting for a direct acknowledgement, a quick clarification, an apology, anything that showed someone behind the scenes understood the gravity of what had happened. Alan Cummings' brief comment helped, but many felt it wasn't enough. And that silence started shaping the narrative, because when audiences don't get answers, they fill in the gaps themselves. Some assumed BBC producers were trying to avoid giving the moment more attention. Others believed legal or network concerns were slowing any response. A few argued that speaking too quickly could have made things worse if details about John Davidson's condition weren't confirmed. But none of those explanations stopped the speculation. Clips continued circulating, each repost adding a new opinion or theory about what really happened behind the cameras. And as more people weighed in, the incident stopped feeling like an isolated mistake. It started feeling like a test of how live television handles unpredictable moments involving disability in the age of instant replay and social media scrutiny. And the longer BBC stayed quiet, the more people focused on one uncomfortable question. Was the real mistake the slur, or the decision not to address it immediately?
Tourette syndrome is a disability, and the tics you've heard tonight are involuntary, which means the person who has Tourette syndrome has no control over their language. We apologise if you were offended.
By the next day, the moment had completely taken over the conversation. News outlets picked it up, commentary videos started breaking down the clip frame by frame. Industry voices weighed in on how live broadcasts are supposed to handle situations like this and whether BBC followed its own standards. And that's when another layer appeared. People began comparing this incident to past award show controversies, times when producers cut audio instantly, times when broadcasts switched cameras or muted the crowd. Those comparisons made viewers ask a new question. If it worked before, why didn't it work at the BAFTAs? The debate stopped being emotional and started sounding technical. Broadcast delays, control rooms, decision windows measured in seconds. Suddenly, everyone wanted to understand what actually happens behind the scenes when something unexpected goes wrong. But the more technical the conversation became, the more pressure landed on BBC, because technical explanations can also sound like excuses. And while analysts debated systems and timing, the audience focused on something simpler. They just wanted to know who made the call and why it played out the way it did. And that question, who made the call, never really got a clear answer. Instead, the story drifted into a space where everyone had an opinion but nobody had full certainty. Industry insiders suggested one thing. Viewers believed another. Warner Bros. Even reportedly requested the moment be removed from later broadcasts, adding corporate pressure to the mix. BBC's silence left room for interpretation, and interpretation quickly turned into competing narratives. Some people argued that live television is messy and imperfect, that no system can catch everything in real time, especially involuntary outbursts related to Tourette syndrome. Others said that explanation didn't hold up when millions of viewers heard the same thing and wondered why safeguards didn't activate. Meanwhile, celebrities like Jamie Foxx called the incident unacceptable, while the NAACP issued statements supporting understanding of medical conditions, showing how divided even public figures were on the appropriate response. And the longer the debate continued, the more the moment stopped being about John Davidson's condition. It became about trust. Trust in live broadcasts. Trust in production teams. Trust that when something crosses a line, someone behind the scenes will step in. Because once that trust gets questioned, audiences start watching differently. They stop assuming the show is in control. And when that feeling spreads, even future broadcasts get judged through the same lens. Which is why this moment didn't end when the BAFTAs did. It carried forward, turning into a larger conversation about responsibility, preparedness, and who gets held accountable when live television goes wrong.
The BBC, which broadcast the ceremony, also releasing an apology amid criticism, including from the likes of Jamie Foxx, reiterating that Davidson's verbal tics are involuntary and not intentional. The BAFTAs have yet to respond beyond Cummings' on-air apology.
And in the end, that's why this moment stuck with people long after the BAFTA Film Awards ended. It wasn't just about one word shouted in a crowded room. It was about everything that followed: the pause, the silence, the decisions made behind the scenes, and the feeling that something important happened without anyone fully taking ownership of it in real time. Live television is supposed to feel controlled, polished, predictable. But moments like this remind everyone watching that it only takes a few seconds for that illusion to break. And once it breaks, viewers start asking harder questions. Who was responsible for protecting the audience? Could the moment have been stopped? And why did it feel like nobody at BBC stepped in fast enough? Those questions turned a brief incident into a bigger conversation about accountability, preparation, and how media responds when things go wrong in front of millions, especially when medical conditions like Tourette's syndrome are involved. Because sometimes the most memorable part of a live event isn't what happens on stage. It's how people react when something unexpected slips through. And this time, that reaction became the real story. If you made it this far, you already see how quickly one moment can change the entire conversation. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Do you think this could have been prevented, or was it just a live TV moment nobody could control?